Good afternoon. We're delighted to be joined by Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations. As you all know, today is the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. We're marking it today, though the day's a bit later. So, Jean-Pierre, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this UN Peacekeepers Day. It's always a very important day for us because this is the day where we honor our colleagues, civilian, military, and police who lost their lives in serving peacekeeping. And it's obviously an occasion to not only honor them, but also think about what we can do to follow up on their service. This was also today a special occasion because we had a special ceremony when the Secretary General awarded posthumously a deceased peacekeeper from Malawi, Private Chitete, with the Captain Diagne Medal, which is an award that is very exceptionally delivered to a peacekeeper who went beyond the call of duty and performed a heroic act. And Private Chitete was serving in eastern Congo, in North Kivu, and he was taking part in an offensive or proactive operation against the ADF group in the region that is affected by Ebola. And during that attack, he acted very bravely in protection of civilians, protecting his own comrades, and he died as he was rescuing one of his fellow peacekeeper from Tanzania. So this is again a special occasion because, as I say, we don't. This is really the first time that we awarded the Secretary General awarded this medal. I think the peacekeeping, this International Day of Peacekeeper, for us is, as I say, a day where we reflect on how we can best serve and honor these fallen peacekeepers by increasing our efforts to better protect our peacekeepers, but also better protect civilians. And this is really one of the same things. We have, under the guidance of Secretary General, undertaken a number of efforts. I think you're familiar with them. We started with the plan to reduce the number of fatalities in peacekeeping, the so-called Santos Cruz plan. We are implementing that plan now we've been implementing for 1.5 years. And we then broaden the scope of our efforts with Action for Peacekeeping, which covers not only the efforts to reduce the number of fatalities in peacekeeping, which are really efforts to increase performance, but also take a look at what more we can do to advance political solutions to increase and improve our partnership, to increase the number of women in peacekeeping, and to make sure that conduct and discipline will be improved, and certainly including the efforts on sexual exploitation abuse. So we think of these fallen peacekeepers, and it only redoubles our determination to continue what's been already undertaken. I think it's fair to speak about the achievement of peacekeeping in such a day. We talk about the challenges, we talk about the shortcomings. I think it's right because this is where we have to work on. But at the same time, it's important to bear in mind that our peacekeepers work every single day in very difficult conditions. They do protect every single day hundreds of thousands of civilians. In many cases, such as in South Sudan or Central African Republic, they quite often make the difference between life and death for so many civilians. And in addition to that, they are indispensable to create the space that is necessary for political efforts to be taken forward. Now, The challenges, you all know them. The environment in which we work have become increasingly dangerous. We have had last year less fatalities as a result of hostile attacks, but we still our peacekeepers are still under heavy threats. We've seen that in January when more than 10 of our peacekeepers lost their life in Mali as a result of an attack against their camp in Agalok. We still work in environments where hundreds of thousands of vulnerable civilians are under threat. We protect them in IDP and protection of civilian camps. We protect them by facilitating humanitarian access to them and supporting the work of our humanitarian colleagues. And we also protect them by working on political efforts. And I would like to emphasize that because ultimately the most important thing that we can do is to help achieve political solutions. We cannot do that alone. We need the support of our member states. We need the support of the regional, sub-regional organization. I worked a lot with the African Union. We have a great partnership with them. And thanks to these efforts, we managed to secure a peace agreement in Central African Republic, which now has to be implemented. We are working a lot to take forward the implementation of the so-called revitalized peace agreement in South Sudan. And we are making similar efforts in other settings. So I just want to emphasize the importance of these political efforts and the need for all stakeholders to support these political efforts. Parallel to that, of course, we will continue to do our best to, as I said, to honor the memory of Private Chitete and to honor the memory of all these peacekeepers who lost their life by stepping up our efforts on performance, training, equipment, accountability, leadership, medical support, all of this. I think we're making headways in most of these areas, but we still have a long way to go, and it takes partnership as well. We cannot do everything alone. We need the support of our member states. We were gratified when more than 150 member states subscribed to our Action for Peacekeeping initiative. It's about shared commitments. So we have our own commitments. We're working on them. Member states have subscribed and committed to doing a number of things, and we also look to them to deliver on these commitments. I think I will stop here and look forward to your question. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lacroix. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you for doing this briefing. Come back often. I have two questions. The first is that, as you yourself said, UN peacekeepers are being sent into areas where in many cases there is no peace to keep. What actually is the UN doing about this? And how concerned are you about what's happening in the G5 Sahel area in terms of that force which is formed by countries that do not have a lot of financial or military resources being able to take on very serious extremist threats without solid UN backing and financing? Thank you.
If you could maybe just answer that,
right.
We'll do one-on-one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I agree that it's a new challenge to be facing with such environments. And I believe that the response that we're trying to bring to that is change the way in which we operate. We need peacekeeping operations and uniform colleagues to have different kind of assets. We were putting an emphasis on mindset because everybody has to realize that it's a very different peacekeeping today. We put an emphasis on better protection, which has to do with training and equipment. We also put an emphasis on mobility and the ability to deter, prevent, preempt threats and react whenever those threats materialize. But then again, I would like to emphasize ultimately it's about political efforts. So no peace to keep means that we have to work harder to bring peace back to these countries, hence the importance of political engagement. The G5 force, it's a welcome development that countries in the region decided to take, to basically take their own destiny in their hands and work together to address the threats that they're facing. And the UN has been supportive of that at the outset. But the G5 needs more support. You are familiar with the Secretary General's position regarding the funding of forces such as the G5 force. We stated since the beginning that we thought sustainable, predictable funding was needed. By the way, it's not only for financial reasons, it's only to signal that there is a commitment to support G5 or any other such force in the long run. And that position is still very much ours. At the same time, it's for the member states and particularly the Security Council to decide on that. In the meantime, what we do is we do our best to support the G5 with the mission, the means of our missions in Mali. We have a mandate to support the G5 force in different ways, so logistics support, the medical support, infrastructures, and we're ready to do more if there was a decision to extend that the scope of that support. It has to be a sustained effort. It's as you were saying rightly, these are countries with many challenges and armed forces that are some of them are in reconstruction. At the same time, they have to be also in operation. We need partnership as well. I think the support that are brought by individual member states, that is brought by the European Union in Mali to the Malian armed forces is extremely important, but we have to stay the course. It's challenging, but we definitely have to stay the course.
Sherwin?
Hi, Mr. Lacroix. We just had a chat with Jackson Chitete, the brother of the fallen peacekeeper, who talked about the dire financial situation that the family finds itself in, including the lack of a permanent home for his widow. So I wonder what sort of benefits accrue to a family of a fallen peacekeeper. Could you explain how that works?
I can explain with not too many details, but what I can tell you is that the UN policy is to provide compensation for the family of deceased peacekeeper, and we do that very quickly. The compensation to the family was already paid to them. I don't think I would go much into the details because I think that has to remain in private domain, but it has been already paid to the family. So we want to be expeditious in granting those families the compensation that they deserve, knowing that, of course, it will never make up for the losses of their loved ones.
So it's a UN prerequisite to do that, and not the national government or the army from which that peacekeeper comes from.
I don't know what particular member states would do, but to the families. But the UN does pay compensation, and I can tell you that it has been paid to the Chitete family.
Philippe and then James.
Bonjour, Monsieur Lacroix. Apparently, the US would like to reduce the budget of the mission in Mali. There is some discussion in the Fifth Committee on that. Can you do the same mission with less money?
Well, on the one hand, I will start by saying, as I always said, certain degree of pressure on the way in which we use our financial resources is not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, I will equally say peacekeeping is a very dangerous and challenging matter, particularly in environments such as the one in Mali. So our peacekeepers need to have adequate resources and adequate means and assets. We're doing our best to find efficiencies where we can, and I think we've proven that, particularly with the savings that we achieved in air operation. But you're familiar with the challenges that we're facing in Mali and the danger, the losses of life, and at the same time, the incredible dedication of our peacekeepers, as demonstrated recently in Aguelok in January, where essentially our peacekeepers from Chad prevented the taking over by an armed group of the entire city, not only the UN camp, but the entire city. So I think there has to be this understanding that, on the one hand, we are determined to continue our efforts to find efficiencies and saving wherever possible. On the other hand, our peacekeepers need and deserve enough financial support to be able to deliver in their mandate and protect themselves and the population that they're serving.
James and then Mr. Sato.
James Bays, Al Jazeera. It's a related question about the finances. The SG said this morning that member states need to provide the resources and political will for peacekeeping, but as you know, the arrears owed to your budget by member states are going up and up. How much of a financial crisis are you in? And you also know that one member state owes much more than all the others, and that figure keeps going up and up. What's your message to the Trump administration?
Well, I don't think it's for me to address any specific member state. What I can say is that whenever the organization is in arrears in relation to its peacekeeping budget, first we have to pay our salaries, then we have to pay our vendors, and then we reimburse our troop and police contributing countries. And what happens when we have arrears is that the biggest part of the burden falls on those troop and police contributing countries, and they're the one who need support and funding to improve their equipment, to improve their training, to improve the performance, the very performance that our member states expect to improve. So I think there has to be consideration given to that. The more we would be in arrears, the more troop and police contributing country will be affected. And if they are affected, then the less they will be in a position to deliver on what it is expected from them, which is to continue working on increasing their impact and performance, their training, their equipment.
Mr. Sato. No.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm Sato from Japan NHK. Thank you. Two questions to you. One is related to the budget. What's your prospect and expectation for the next 2 years PKO budget coming soon? And another question is about Japan. Japan is not a troop contributor, but still the number third financial contributor. What do you expect the Japan's more contribute? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that over the next 2 years, we will certainly continue to make, as I say, our efforts to be more effective and efficient. We are, as you know, in the process of downsizing and eventually terminating some of our missions. Haiti's mission will be subject to final decision by the Security Council closed this year. The mission in Darfur, the AU-UN mission called UNAMID, is likely to be called next year, to be closed next year, again subject to decision by the Security Council. And we have to now reconfigure our big operation in the Democratic Republic of Congo with a view to gradual downsizing and exit, of course, depending on the evolution of the situation there, particularly regarding Ebola. This is the sort of the backdrop against which we're operating. Now, then again, we need adequate financing to support our efforts. We need adequate financing to make sure that our peacekeepers will be able to continue protecting civilians, supporting peace, and making all these efforts to improve impact. Again, this is the expectation of our member states as well as our own expectation. Japan is a very important contributing country to peacekeeping in many different ways. Financial contributor, the third largest contributor, a very important contributor to efforts aimed at improving training. I have in mind particularly the efforts that Japan is making to cooperate with other countries in the South, African countries, and our country in Asia to increase the skills of our operation in engineering, now medical support as well. I've been to Japan recently, and I had an opportunity to visit some of the training centers and some of the places where these efforts are being carried out in Japan. And moving forward, as peacekeeping will be more and more about making sure that we have the right level of technological mastering, that we will modernize our assets. The support of countries such as Japan to make sure that we achieve this goal will be increasingly important. So I think we will continue to rely on Japan's support in that.
Mr. Klein?
Yes, Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. What measurable progress have you been able to make in identifying and sending back to troop contributing countries those troops that have been identified as human rights abusers? And secondly, in the DRC, have any of the peacekeepers been exposed to Ebola, and what steps are being taken to protect those who might be exposed to Ebola? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We have, first of all, a process whereby we conduct a vetting on the commanders, and in some cases, we do more than this. We do systematically vet contingents that are to be sent peacekeeping to make sure that no one will be sent there with a record of human rights violations. And then the other side of it is conduct and discipline, and making sure that our peacekeepers will play by the rule and particularly respect human rights due diligence, which is essential. And it's about training, leadership, and mindset. And we're working on all of this. We have increased very substantially the training that we're providing to our troops or our commanders on respect for human rights. Also sensitizing them to cultural differences, making sure that they know how to engage with communities. And here, the special role of women and female engagement team, and the need for us to increase the number of women in peacekeeping is absolutely crucial, because this is where we really make a difference in terms of creating and building confidence, and also making sure that whenever there's a risk of or an environment that is conducive to sexual exploitation abuse, we detect that, and we're better able to prevent that. I think we've made a number of efforts that are, I think, bearing fruit in the fighting against sexual exploitation abuse. Some contingents have been repatriated. Some convictions have been made by courts in many of our troop and police contributing countries. We have also provided better support to victims, and I think we're in a better position to be informed about allegations. But both on making sure that there is appropriate human rights vetting, that we ensure that there is appropriate respect for human rights and international rules regarding respect of human rights, make sure that we are effective in fighting sexual exploitation and abuse, we need to do more. I think it's a process. I think we have made some significant achievements, but it's something that we need to continue. And by the way, it also depends on our member states, particularly on troop and police contributing country, but all of those who can help us with providing training and sensitization.
On Ebola.
Ebola. I think, first of all, it's important to underline that the support that MONUSCO is providing to the Ebola response is crucial and multifaceted. It's not only about the proactive operation that we've been undertaking against the groups like the ADF and others. It's about accompanying and supporting our colleagues from WHO and other organizations in everything they do, from recce's to infrastructure to logistical support, and we are, as we're working with WHO and we're working with other agencies, and all of them are making provisions required to protect our the team from contamination. We do that as well for our peacekeeper, basically. So far, we haven't had any incident. We need to continue being very vigilant because this is a very challenging environment. As you probably know, we decided recently to strengthen our support to the Ebola response and to particularly strengthen the coordination support on the spot in Butembo. But it's certainly a very challenging effort, and we'll be dedicating, I think, a lot of efforts in the weeks ahead to improve the response.
Dulcie and then Maggie.
Thanks. I'm curious back to the U.S. relationship with peacekeeping. So do you have any contact with the U.S. government, the State Department or Congress or the White House or John Bolton to discuss the U.S. government's support of peacekeeping? And are you aware that there is a House bill underway to pay up the arrears and the dues from 2017 and 2018? And given the U.S. reluctance to further fund peacekeeping operations, well, how will that affect the future of the UN peace operations? Thanks.
Thank you. No, we are in constant touch with U.S. representatives, and by the way, I think it's important to highlight that we're being given a great deal of support from the United States, and we shouldn't forget that in terms of training, the provision of expertise, and even staff to improve our efforts on performance and accountability and leadership. So it's a very multifaceted relation with the United States in terms of peacekeeping. Now, I'm aware of the current discussion in U.S. Congress. I can't really speculate on what the outcome will be. The only thing that I can repeat again is what I've said about the arrears. The more arrears we accrue, and the more troop and police contributing countries are affected. And what I said about the fact that we need adequate financing for a peacekeeping operation. Again, we are committed to continue our efforts to find savings and efficiency, and we're also committed to revisiting our peacekeeping operations, and we are absolutely not shy about recommending that they should be either downsized or terminated when we think that the situation evolves, and in some cases the situation is such in a given country that it doesn't deserve anymore or warrant anymore an international presence of a peacekeeping nature. And we did that for Darfur, we did that for Haiti, we did make a number of recommendations to the Security Council regarding MONUSCO. Actually, the Security Council has been more conservative than we were in terms of reducing the size of the operation at this early stage. So we think that it's important to keep the constant evolution process of peacekeeping operation. At the same time, again, I can only repeat that it's a challenging work, and it needs adequate resource.
Margaret?
Mr. Lacroix, what is at the top of your wish list right now? What would be a game changer for peacekeeping in terms of technology or something that would both contribute to protecting your troops and carrying out mandates?
Well, I mean, I will bring you a slightly different answer. I think really at the top of my wish list is more success in advancing political solution and greater support, greater engagement from all those who can help in that regard. Security Council, member states, regional, sub-regional organization. I can complain about the AU. We have an excellent working relationship. We do a lot. And I think it's been productive. But this is really the crux of matter, working on political efforts. Now, on performance and impact, I believe that there has to be a comprehensive understanding of what the new reality of peacekeeping and what it requires. I think we've already made a lot of progress in terms of eliciting this understanding. It's now a very different environment where every single peacekeepers and particularly leadership need to understand that they can be under threat, that they will be in challenging situations where civilians will be threatened, then peacekeepers will be threatened and attacked, and that requires mindset first. That requires, I think, mindset is a key word. But then on top of that, you have to have the right equipment, you have to have the right training, and our responsibility is also to make sure that two things. We make sure that there will be an evolution in the assets of peacekeeping. We're putting a lot of emphasis on mobility, reactivity, impact, less numbers, better use of technology. That's one thing. The other thing is, how do we work together? And I think it will be very important moving forward that we make sure that both at national headquarters and in our regional offices in peacekeeping, we are completely integrated with the civilian, with the military, with the police components of peacekeeping. When we investigate incidents where we've been failing, particularly failing to protect civilians, we almost always conclude that the cause for this failure are multiple. It's not only about a troop or police contributing country. In some cases it could be, but it's also about how will we organize ourselves, how we make sure that our civilian colleagues talk to the police and talk to the military, that we share information, that we use the information that we get to preempt and prevent threats, that any information that we get can be actionable. So these are the kind of thing on which I would want to put an emphasis moving forward as well. So lots of, it's a rather long wish list, but that's how it is.
Thank you, James, and that'll be the last question.
Hi, thanks so much, Mr. Lacroix. I've got a question about Yemen. Obviously, your UN colleagues have got a very difficult job in Hodeidah right now. Mr. Lollisgaard was here a week or so ago talking about these very complicated Phase 1, Phase 2 redeployments where they're trying to possibly open up spaces in Hodeidah as the Houthis withdraw. He's only got 15 monitors on the ground. And obviously, any more substantial deployment is going to involve the council. But is it something that you've looked at? And do you think that's a context in which a couple of hundred blue helmets could make a big difference?
At this stage, what we've been focusing on really, particularly the Department of Peace Operation, is how we can make sure that as the situation in the ground in Hodeidah will evolve, then we will be in a position to deploy the number of monitors, police and military officers that is needed. So as you say, I think we have 15 observers deployed in Hodeidah. We have many more that are ready to be deployed. It depends on the conditions on the ground. It also depends on the clearances that we need to get from the parties. In other words, the the visas that we have to obtain from these parties. It's been challenging. I hope it will get better. I think there's been a lot of work done to improve the practical and physical conditions for these monitors to be deployed. We had issues regarding health care and accommodation. This is improving. Now, we have, as I say, the possibility to deploy more observers if the situation in the ground evolves and if we get the necessary clearances for that. Now, moving forward is really hypothetical, and whether at some point member states Security Council would determine that the space and the conditions are there to consider a different form of UN presence. I think it's premature. Right now, we're really focusing on making sure that what has been achieved in Stockholm, Hudaida agreement, will be implemented.
Sorry, quick point of clarity there. You talk about it as if it's a DPKO mission. My understanding was that it was like a separate thing, like a political mission.
We're working integrated now, and the overall leadership of these efforts, political efforts, and the operation Hudaida lies with the Department of Political Affairs and Prevention Political Affairs. But as I said, we have been, as a Department of Peace Operation, overseeing the provision of military and police observers. But more important than this, we've been really working in an integrated manner. I think moving forward, this is really the way to go. We don't really look at whether it's DPO or DPPA. What we really want to have is to have an impact and to make sure that this potential that is there, with this Hudaida agreement, would be really used to the best.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know you have to go to a medal ceremony. So.
Merci. À la prochaine. Ciao.